So, when do we begin?
Must say we take back London.
2015 was an interesting year for Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed Unity was a massive disappointment for fans, and the series was set to make a radical departure going forward, with Assassin's Creed Origins in 2017. However, before this, the series had a gap to fill, which took the form of Assassin's Creed Syndicate, set during the Industrial Revolution and featuring a cheeky pair of twins as the protagonists, Jacob and Frye. Assassin's Creed has always had levity, but never outright portrayed as a comedy. For that reason, a lot of fans disregarded the twins as a bad parody of prior protagonists. For this reason, I think it's only right that we do a deep dive on these characters, and see just how much effort was made in their characterisation, or if they were simply an opportunity for a Ubisoft in crisis to poke fun at itself whilst it decided what to do next. In this first part we'll be looking at Jacob Frye, and in the next video we'll take a look at Evie. You may ask why I'm not handling both of these characters together. However, Syndicate was the first Assassin's Creed game to let you freely switch between the two, and they each had dedicated storylines, so apart from intersecting moments, each of them has their own story. For the sake of pacing, I'm going to dissect each of the twins separately, and give them each the spotlight. For that reason, these videos may overlap in places to get the full picture. With that said, welcome back to my Assassin's Creed character study series, where we take a deeper look into the protagonists of Assassin's Creed. So far, we've taken a look at Ezio, Edward, Arno and Connor. If you're new to the series, the card is on screen now for you to take a look at the other entries, and please consider liking and subscribing to stay up to date on the latest uploads. As per usual, we'll start by looking at the character and design, the story and setting, and finally conclude with how the character was implemented. Today we're looking at Jacob Frye. Known for his light-hearted attitude and fun sense of humour, was Jacob more than just a joke? Let's celebrate a good old Assassin's Christmas and take a closer look. Born in 1847 alongside his sister Evie, Jacob Frye was raised by his father as an assassin from birth. However, whilst his sister was studious and interested in the ways of the Creed, Jacob was more interested in exploring the factories and gambling dens in Crawley, to better see for himself what the world had in store for him. This rebellious attitude extends to his 21-year-old Sorry, this feels like deja vu. In Assassin's Creed 3, they tried to convince us that this was a 13-year-old, and now I'm expected to believe that these two are 21. Why does Ubisoft make all these characters look older than they are? Jacob's character is defined by his sense of humour. Whilst he certainly has his darker shades, a lot of fans will know Jacob by the jokes he makes throughout the story.
The sanitary inspector. This man is dead.
Whilst Ezio, Edward and even an early game Arno had their moments of levity and humour, Jacob's character consistently uses humour to escape from his issues, which gets explored as he's faced with the darker side of London and the characters he meets along the way. In terms of design, let's look at Jacob's first appearance in Crawley. A fairly simple design that emphasises the way Jacob and Evie had grown up in a less privileged area and not from the upper class like for example Arno. Jacob even comes with a flat cap to convey the Victorian urchin aesthetic, which can be folded away for a retractable assassin hood, which looks to be made from a potato sack. This is the first time an Assassin's Creed game had the option to toggle the hood by crouching. Therefore, headwear is very important to incorporate into Jacob's design. What I like about the hood being optional is that it allows the outfits to be designed as clothing and less of a suit, making a lot of the costumes in Syndicate just fashionable clothes from the time, and less like Unity or Assassin's Creed 3, where the robes were military oriented. Here, the goal is to be as inconspicuous as possible, and so the assassin robes are less robes, but more just an outfit that the character would wear, that have the option for a hood when in stealth. Because of this, you won't find any assassin insignias to broadcast the Creed, or pieces of armour that don't fit the Victorian period. Jacob's outfit featured in the marketing is an unlockable that isn't tied to any story-related content, which did surprise me when playing, as I wondered how he would acquire the outfit. Previous Assassin's Creed games have had such a heavy focus on obtaining the assassin robes, that it makes a point of saying that Jacob's outdoorsman outfit is just given to you, since the costumes are noticeably less important this time round. Whereas Arno had such a massive range of options that a lot of them didn't suit his personality, the optional outfits here are all very fitting to Jacob's personality, which is a big plus in my books. Now if we move back to this signature outfit, this outfit is heavily inspired by a crow, as opposed to an eagle, which inspired previous assassin robes, giving this outfit a darker appearance and an inverse of previous characters, right down to the beak of the hood being inverted. This is due to Jacob's alternate approach when dealing with situations. He's more brash and direct, which doesn't fit the assassin code. However, he still completes his tasks without breaking the tenets of the creed, so he never needs to deal with the consequences of his actions. When not using the hood, Jacob sports a top hat, which goes great alongside his mutton chop facial hair to make him look the part of a businessman. As implied by the name of the game, Jacob is looking to make it big with his gang, and wants to look the part as their leader, with authority which a top hat would easily indicate. A leather coat is a known symbol of someone who sticks to a cause, but is also fearless and headstrong. Look at any character in fiction that wears a leather jacket, and they're usually the one to take charge. Jacob's coat has the same effect, and makes him look more like a typical street thug, imposing and intimidating. He was designed with a rock star motif, several sharp angles and layered textures that show his growing wealth, as his gang the Rooks grow stronger and his influence begins to turn into wealth. Also, the concept art for him has him looking like Sam Worthington, which isn't a bad point of reference. Underneath his coat, we see a few familiar details carried across from prior characters, to give Jacob that distinct assassin look. Namely, the popped collar of Ezio's time and the red belt, which shows that he carries a lot of the traits that Ezio did. At this point it could be a bit old and tiring to carry across these same motifs, but I think here it's more a coincidence, because I see the purpose of the popped collar for Jacob is to better show off his jewellery, specifically his necklace, which is a shilling that was given as a physical item to people who pre-ordered the game, so whilst never mentioned in-game, it clearly held significant value at one point in development, and so naturally Jacob's design would incorporate it as a focus point. Alongside a green waistcoat, we have a colour scheme for Jacob Frye that consists of earthy colours, browns, reds and greens, which represents simplicity but friendliness. Jacob might not be as intellectual as his sister or as much of a strategist, but he is honest and straightforward, making him trustworthy and likeable for the people. When building a gang, you need a leader that people can rally towards, which Jacob embodies wholeheartedly. Moving on to Jacob's arsenal, the weapons of Assassin's Creed Syndicate are few but expertly designed to fit the period. It should be noted, both Evie and Jacob have access to the same weapons, and so they aren't designed with a particular character in mind from a gameplay perspective, which can make the twins' combat feel very similar, but it does prove that both twins can adapt to any weapon. Jacob has access to a cane with a hidden sword inside, a kukri, which is a form of short machete used in Nepal, or knuckle dusters, with a revolver pistol being available for ranged attacks. Each of these weapons has a very consistent colour scheme of black and gold, showing that whilst the assassin outfits may be rugged and more personalised, the weapons are prestigious and kept in immaculate condition, with the gold and black being an expensive and rare colour scheme to show the assassins as hidden wealth and power, which the twins had access to from Henry Green. The cane sword is particularly designed with a crow at the head to carry across the motif. A crow is the perfect choice for Jacob due to its association with both mischief and fearlessness. Finally, we move on to the Assassin Gauntlet, a crazy multi-tool for the assassins, which combines several features into one steampunk-inspired design, including a poison dart, hidden blade, rope launcher and brass knuckle. This piece of kit is adapted from the standard hidden blade and has quite a history, first being used by an unnamed assassin in America in 1852 before the design made its way to Victorian London, later being modified by Alexander Graham Bell to incorporate the rope launcher and hallucinogenic darts, which became the standard design right through until World War II. The rope launcher allows Jacob to travel both vertically and horizontally across London, and removes any need for parkour. However, this tool is purely used to speed up traversal, due to the wide roads of London disrupting the flow of gameplay on foot. On a narrative level, I can only extract that it adds impatience to Jacob's movement, which fits his character well, but since it's identical to Evie's, I can't exactly call it intentional. Before moving on to the story, I want to quickly mention the marketing, since Jacob Frye was all over the promotional material for Syndicate. He's front and centre on all promotional images, and features solely in the E3 cinematic trailer. Now, there was unfortunately a lot of sexism going on internally at Ubisoft from higher-ups that didn't think having a female on the box would sell copies, and as stupid as that sounds, considering the likes of Rise of the Tomb Raider came out in the same year, for a game that sells itself on having two playable characters, Ubisoft certainly didn't want you to know that. I can speculate why this is the case, but it gets worse the more you think about it. What this does for Jacob, unfortunately, is present an idea of him in the marketing that simply isn't true to his character. He has to come across cooler and more calculating, which isn't his traits at all. The promotional material should have instead highlighted how he is the more brazen twin that will cause a scene if it gets the job done, in contrast to Evie. Without that contrast, it's going to give people a shock when they play the game and find that he isn't the patient type at all. I think the marketing plays more into the Peaky Blinders kind of character, one that's more bitter and shut off, like a cold businessman, which fits with British stereotypes of the time, but certainly isn't the truth. In fact, it's the complete opposite, which will have given players tonal whiplash with Jacob that may be the reason he got a stronger backlash than he deserved.
Brother George, it is as I feared. London has fallen.
The year is 1868, and we join our characters in Croydon.
Croydon, city of 1,000 dreams. I love Croydon, has a very strong branch of Nando's.
After a massive exposition dump from Henry Green about the Templars' newly appointed leader in London, we meet Jacob and Evie Frye, hunting down two Templars, seemingly rushing into the situation without hearing their mentor out first. A mentor which then proceeds to dump even more exposition explaining the Fryes' twins' personalities.
Ladies and gentlemen, the unstoppable Frye twins. See them nightly at Covent Garden.
Which I must say is a hefty amount of hand-holding for the first few minutes of the game, and sets you off to a bit of a stumble. We learn quickly that Jacob has a lot of trust in himself, and doesn't feel a need to do any preparation for his targets.
And I've got all I need right here. I'll extend your regards to Ferris.
He seems to take the whole scenario quite lightly, as he tells Evie to have fun, and the two seem to be in good spirits considering they're about to murder people, which puts the tone of the game off to a strange start. I'm guessing that this was done to emphasise their boredom, as they're sick of taking out Templars in smaller areas and wish to travel to London to deal a more significant blow to the Templars.
Have fun.
Don't die.
However, to be in a laughing and joking mood makes the two seem ignorant. As Jacob, you infiltrate a factory, and we see that a boy has been crushed under a piece of industrial machinery, which he gets scolded for as being his fault. This is something that, while seeming cartoonishly evil, was actually the case in real life for a lot of the factories in England that had awful conditions and money-hungry owners that didn't care for their workers. This is prime motivation for Jacob to quickly dispatch of the owner Rupert Ferris. In his confession, he comments on how Jacob has had little impact on the Templar plan, and that their Templar's machine has been running for years, and that killing him will make no difference. He essentially just explains the dilemma that Jacob is having internally. Jacob wishes to rid London of the Templars, but can't do it from
I went to Debenhams once.
When Ferris insults Jacob's ego by calling him a coward, we see this causes Jacob to quieten, because he knows that Ferris is right. Having an assassination this early in the game skips forward a lot of character development that other games had, and so the game uses the first kill to get us up to speed with how Jacob feels, which is done really effectively. Again, I could comment on the tonal whiplash here, since Jacob has gone from joking and considering the job to be an easy and carefree one, to being hushed to silence in only a few minutes. I think you can tell that this section has been very rushed, and we just get introduced to this generically evil character only to quickly kill him and use him as a way of conveying more exposition, which is not great storytelling where these things could have been shown over time. Jacob does then get an exciting set piece where the train he's on gets set on the wrong rail and falls off the edge of a broken bridge, which he narrowly avoids. For a scene that was all about the assassins being bored in Croydon, they aren't half having an eventful time of it. Jacob even makes a quip after this, which makes his character go all over the place.
Well, we seem to have made an unscheduled stop.
My only question is, how seriously is he taking this situation? Is he using humour to avoid an internal conflict? It seems we'll have to wait and see. Meeting back up with Evie and their mentor, the assassin tells them to wait and continue with the slow process of dismantling the Templars from the outside in, but Jacob is dissatisfied and wants to take more action from the heart of London, managing to persuade Evie to leave the assassins behind.
Sir David is dead. They do not know how to use it. The council shall guide us. Sound advice that your father would have seconded. I shall see you back in Crawley.
Patience, Evie.
The gentle sound of opportunity passing us by.
So what's stopping us? London is waiting to be liberated. Forget Crawley.
Father would have wanted us to
Oh,
listen.
Father. You could continue his legacy in London.
Freeing future generations from a city ruled by Templars. You know, Jacob Frye, you might just be right.
Then shall we?
Yes, let's.
They sneak onto a train and make a break for London, ending this prologue. For a prologue, it flip-flops around a lot, and Jacob's personality is very difficult to get a read on. When Jacob is on his own, he doesn't have much to say, apart from joking around. During his interaction with Ferris, he only says,
It is done. Your Grandmaster will fall. He will take London from your hands. Is that it?
He only says that
It is done.
as if he didn't care for the people he was saving or the stakes. He seems as if it's just one more day in the life for him, and he's either become desensitized to it, or he avoids talking about it, since any talk from a Templar shuns him to silence. He jokes in nearly every line of dialogue, but we never seem to get any insight into his motivations. We know why Evie wants to fight the Templars, but not Jacob. He seems to just be looking for excitement, and if it happens to align with doing the right thing, then he'll go along with it. It's probably best to point out as early as possible that for me personally, the humour doesn't work. I don't find the Marvel quip style of comedy to be very funny, and it's going to be subjective whether you like Jacob's character because of his jokes, or if it drives you up the wall. And I say that here and not in my other character studies, because man does Ubisoft want you to like this character. The only way they know how to do it is to insert jokes in, and this can be at a detriment to his character.
What's this, Greenie? Assassin Christmas?
This might be a hot take, but I don't think Jacob being funny fits his character. Not the design or the motivations he has later. It just doesn't add up, and I think it juxtaposes with the bleak and awful period to have Jacob be all light-hearted and funny, without the mask ever slipping away or explaining why this is the case. Arriving in London, Jacob has no idea who Henry Green is, and has been told this 3 times already. I'm not sure if this is just a joke or if he actually has a terrible memory. When Jacob and Evie meet Henry Green, he graces us with yet another spout of exposition, and this time it's the same one from the opening, which begs the question of why it was repeated. It's not the most complicated news, only that London is under Templar influence by a man named Crawford Starrick, and lays out the mission the twins must accomplish, removing the boroughs of London from Starrick's control and liberate London. Whilst previous Assassin's Creed games have had an air of mystery about them, with the antagonists of Assassin's Creed 1 and 2 not being revealed until well into the 3rd act of the game, here everything is laid out from the start. You understand exactly the checklist you must complete, and what lies at the end of it, meaning that the game can throw some fun diversions in the way to keep things fresh. Yeah, they are definitely going to do that.
His reach extends all across London.
I've always thought of myself as a gang leader. Firm, but fair.
Well, I have uniforms. And I'll unite a mix of disenfranchised outsiders under one name. That's it, Evie. We can rally them to our side.
Oh, like the way that you rallied those card players at the Oakbrook Tavern into the river.
Oh, that was different. They beat me at whist. I can see it now. We'll call ourselves the Rooks.
You were never good at chess either.
Have you got a better plan?
Well, that was fucking dreadful.
So, out of nowhere, Jacob decides that he wants to be in charge of a gang. A criminal gang. Instead of expanding the assassin influence in London and bringing the Brotherhood back to power, he wants to instead become Thomas Shelby. I think this cements that Jacob Frye just does not care about the assassins. I honestly think he's only an assassin because his sister and father were, and he just sticks around for the fun of it. This, however, isn't a bad thing. In fact, it could be a fantastic starting point as he learns to appreciate the tenets of the Creed and the Brotherhood overall.
Should you ever be in the mood for a tale or two, you can always find me where the ale is warm and tempers are hot. Ta-ta!
What an odd man.
Okay, that one got me. That was quite funny. Henry Green smothers us with a pillow of further exposition. Sorry. I didn't realise I'd wrote that. Oh my god. Henry Green smothers us with a pillow of exposition on how we'll be able to retake the boroughs. I am not a fan of exposition, Jesus. After meeting with a policeman dressed as a woman that calls Jacob out on not being... There's just a policeman dressed as a woman. After meeting with a policeman dressed as a woman that calls Jacob out on not being very stealthy for an assassin, something that is never brought up again, we get a confrontation with Whitechapel's gang leader on his train, which just further proves the policeman's point, and Jacob kills him out in the open without any dialogue throughout. The leader of the first borough is simply a generic enemy which Jacob cares very little about, and there isn't really a connection there. However, after the train is acquired, we get a scene of Jacob and Evie rallying the enemy Blighters gang to their cause.
Kaylock is dead. Whitechapel is no longer in the hands of the Blighters.
You now have the chance to join our ranks. We welcome all who would stand up to Starrick and his cutthroats.
Without needing any persuasion, there doesn't seem to be a challenge to convince the Templar gang to turn on them, which says something about Jacob's charisma. If a gang element was what the game wanted to focus on, then perhaps some more depth in terms of the assembly of the gang would have helped to flesh it out more, similar to the liberation missions in Assassin's Creed 3. We could have seen how particular members of the gang were affected by Crawford Starrick's rule, instead of just being told about it, and given us 7 unique characters to act as the members of the Rooks. Almost like the Bureau Keepers in the first Assassin's Creed game, or the Master Assassin missions in Assassin's Creed Revelations. We could have interacted with them across the story, and they could have had their own chain of side quests. It's all activities Assassin's Creed has done before, and I think it would give Jacob a greater sense of competency, and show where his strengths lay as he brought people together to speak for the common man. In the next interaction, Evie and Jacob acquire the train for themselves, held by the previous gang leader, and use it as a hideout on wheels. Jacob, however, is already distracted by a rope launcher, acquired from the leader of Whitechapel, and says that he won't pursue the Templars any further until it's fixed, before getting confrontational with Henry Green when he offers to fix it.
Jacob? Is this serious?
I'm not doing anything until this gets fixed.
I believe I know someone who can help with that.
I knew you would, Greenie.
So there's a few things here. Firstly, Jacob getting distracted so easily may hint at a hyperactive mindset, where he struggles to focus, which could also give a reason for him forgetting details like Henry's name in the first sequence. I think it's very selfish and irresponsible of him to drop everything and refuse to continue until his new toy can be fixed. He doesn't justify his reasons for doing this at all, just stands gesturing with it, and it's odd that he holds it next to his bracer and not like a gun as it's supposed to be. I think this is a case where the writers maybe got a little too ahead of the player here, and knows how the final design of the Assassin's Gauntlet is incorporated without explanation. It's Alexander Graham Bell who ultimately configures this design, and so for Jacob to know it kind of implies that he is as intelligent as Alexander Graham Bell. I think the game so far has had the wrong priorities with dialogue, as it does a lot of exposition and humour, but will then cause the characters to make jumps in logic in order to move the plot along, and this is an occasion where Jacob should have offered the benefits of the rope launcher to the cause. Take Assassin's Creed 2, where Ezio sees that the thieves can scale the Palazzo della Seta, so he trains with them to learn the climb leap ability which he can use in subsequent missions to scale Venice's taller buildings. It's a new mechanic with a purpose that fits Ezio's character as he is eager to learn. If Jacob had simply given a reason for why it was so important to have the rope launcher, then it would have helped to narratively justify his actions. There's even a perfectly good reason there in the gameplay. What if instead of the gang leader of Whitechapel being on a train, the set piece was across the rooftops, and Jacob was unable to catch him because the leader had the rope launcher, and used the zipline to traverse quicker than Jacob could parkour. Then Jacob could have instead waited and gone for the gang leader's train, maybe putting an explosive there to lure him out. It puts the leader in a position where he couldn't use the rope launcher to escape, but also a bombastic example of Jacob rushing in guns blazing. His ego being hurt from losing the chase being the reason he wants the launcher, not only to be fixed but improved, so he can prove that he is better than the Blighters. Another issue here is the response he gives to Henry. You can hear that he is frustrated at Henry for being able to solve this problem, and there's no setup for why this is the case. Maybe Jacob likes to be seen as the hero in his sister's eyes, and is jealous of Henry stealing her attention, since he observed their flirtatious glances earlier. But it's not said, so the tone just comes out of nowhere. Alexander Graham Bell assists in fixing the rope launcher, and adjusting it to fit the assassin bracer. It's funny that although this was Jacob's idea, he's very eager to leave once Evie returns the favour to Alexander. Jacob gets impatient, and you can see he's upset at Evie for giving Alexander help. Evie even says that she's glad that Jacob's distraction is concluded, and he seems more and more frustrated, like he can't get his own way, so he just moves on to something else.
And on that note,
it makes his character seem impatient and childish, which does boil to the surface when Jacob gets annoyed at the fact that he doesn't have anyone to kill, and also that Evie is trying to follow in their father's footsteps, even though that's the very reason that Jacob used to get Evie to come with him on the train. It is here, however, that the pair begin their own separate storylines. Jacob focuses on removing Crawford Starrick's influence from London, whilst Evie searches for a piece of Eden that he acquired. Honestly, the next time we get some insight into Jacob's character is quite a bit later, when he gets to the next big assassination mission. Whilst Jacob assists Evie on her mission and gets a little side plot about smuggling, which doesn't give us much new information, he just pretty much sticks to his known traits. It's only when he's tasked to kill the mad Dr. John Elliotson, the one supplying Crawford Starrick with cough syrup, that Jacob gets a chance to grow. Elliotson has a disconnect with human lives, and will kill people in front of a crowd without batting an eyelid. A comparison could certainly be made here for how Jacob acted out of similar lack of care in the prologue, and something could be done there to make Jacob see the impact that killing his targets truly has, aside from being a checklist he can tick off. However, this sequence gets off on the wrong foot, as it is a stealthy infiltration of the hospital, which much better suits Evie's character. The problem from a gameplay perspective is that they need both Jacob and Evie to have identical mechanics, but didn't make the adjustments to the characters to make this work. If Jacob can be patient enough to pose as a dead body to get close to his target, then why is he so impatient in conversation? Unless the game is suggesting that when Jacob is on the hunt is the only time he can truly zone in which case a mad doctor that also feels a lust from killing would draw some fantastic conversation. The problem is that the conversation isn't there. I'm convinced the confession scene here is Jacob's own internal conflict, since Jacob knows him by name and mentions his father, which would be impossible for him to know. This means that Elliotson has no physical presence in the game at all. He is a non-character, and is just a checklist for Jacob to cross off. However, I can see more going on here. My theory is that Jacob uses his targets to learn more about himself, but does it in his head, instead of through their thoughts. Once he silences them, he can think about what that means for him. However, in this case, he's thinking about something completely separate. Instead of the morality of killing, he instead just gets told that he's a letdown to his father, and that he won't beat Starrick, which is not related at all, but does give us at least some of Jacob's motivation. I know in my Connor Kenway video I spent a lot of time covering the Templars, but the truth is, much like in Assassin's Creed 1, the Templars are simply really bad people, and don't teach us anything about the character, whereas every Templar in Assassin's Creed 3 had a well-defined character and purpose in Connor's story. However, Jacob does have some examples where this is the case. One such character is Pearl Attaway, head of a rival transport company to Starrick. Together they managed to put one of Starrick's lackeys, Milner, out of business by stealing his new bus engines and burning his supplies, leaving him out in the open for attack, which Jacob pounces at the opportunity for. Seeing Jacob try and be a businessman whilst being so clearly taken advantage of is very entertaining, and quite in character, like it was only a matter of time before someone took advantage of Jacob's skill set. This lands Jacob in a lot of trouble, when Pearl turns out to be Starrick's cousin, and a Templar operative, that has been deceiving Jacob all along to take out her rivals so she could be the sole power in London. What she doesn't bet on is that Jacob is smarter than she thinks, and tracks her down only to land a brutal air assassination from her train car. The kills in this game certainly don't hold back, and you can see that for Jacob, this is getting taken extremely personally, since he thought he had a future in business with Pearl, only to be treated like a fool. This sequence is a great bottleneck story, showing why Jacob's hasty attitude can get the better of him, and led to more trouble for him without taking the time to assess the situation. And honestly, the next time we get something of this quality is far later, as the next two sequences have very little in terms of character progression, and it's just Jacob learning of a corrupt Bank of England and then protecting the Prime Minister from an assassination attempt. Neither of the targets offer much aside from maybe the best kill animation in the game.
Now then, let's discuss this like... Good God! Who the bloody hell...
Oh, shut up.
Holy shit!
However, pacing-wise, this is very disappointing to see, and it feels like the set pieces were designed before the storyline. Obviously, not every mission needs to be the biggest character study, but much like with Unity, unfortunately there's a lot of dead time, where it's mostly Evie getting the development in between, and so not to confuse the player with too much means that Jacob is off doing essentially side quests. Things do pick up again when Jacob meets Maxwell Roth, and this sequence is probably the biggest takeaway people will have regarding Jacob's character, and arguably is the best in the game. Maxwell Roth was brought out by Starrick to become one of his gang leaders. However, with that money, Roth funded the renovation of a theatre and began putting on plays for the public, which is where Jacob comes across him. Roth is fully prepared to throw all of his money away and take down Starrick alongside Jacob, as he's been watching the assassin for a while and admires his impressive revolution against the Templars. We see Jacob has learned since Pearl Attaway not to be as easily trusting, and questions Roth at first. Roth lives for the thrill, and wouldn't hesitate at the chance to make the chessboard more interesting by working with the assassins. Now, my tone of voice can never do justice for just how crazy this guy is, and you fully believe that he and Jacob would get along well, and when the two exchange an evil giggle over a toast, it doesn't help but make you smile at the idea of Jacob finding someone that finally understands him.
Lewis! My carriage! Shall we?
After they successfully steal some of Starrick's shipments together, Jacob has a reunion with Roth at the theatre, where Roth is seen admiring a crow in a cage and calls it beautiful, already confirmed by the lead scriptwriter that Roth had a thing for Jacob, and admiring a crow is a good way of using the symbolism to refer to Jacob. The crow is however also in a cage, which could refer to how Roth was keeping his thoughts a secret between them, or that he knew something would be keeping them apart. Jacob and Roth do prove to be an effective team together, and throughout the next few missions, we see them have a big impact on taking down Starrick's forces. During this time, Jacob seems to have let his guard down, as with Pearl Attaway, but it seems to be from admiration, although it's left ambiguous as to whether Jacob has any feelings for Roth, or whether he is just happy that they're cutting into Starrick's profits. Roth, however, becomes much more comfortable around Jacob, calling him pet names and indirectly flirting with him. This whole sequence is quite a nice way of giving Jacob a conflict that we haven't seen before in an Assassin's Creed game. Whilst the theme of forbidden love was tackled even in the last game Unity, having a character conflict with their sexuality is a very modern topic to address, and it comes from a period in time where it certainly was present. I noticed as well that Jacob's bad jokes are completely absent here, and the writers treat him like a character and not a caricature. This story is one that is solely contained within this sequence, and one that hasn't been set up or continues after, but it's nice to put in there, and I don't think it classes as queerbaiting. Their story, however, doesn't have a happy ending, as Roth goes too far with his methods of stopping Starrick, and ends up burning down a factory that has children inside. Jacob doesn't hesitate to help rescue the children, but this puts a divide between Roth and Jacob. Roth's ideology was that he should be free to do what he likes, and that true free will was not caring how your actions affected others. The assassins of course do align with free will, but not as a detriment to others. And with this conflict, their partnership comes to an end. Jacob has delivered a handwritten note wishing him all the best in the future, and it could have been left there if the two simply acknowledged that each other's methods were too different to be able to work together. However, as I said earlier, Roth is unfortunately crazy, and too dangerous to leave it be, and sends Jacob the crow he kept in the theatre, now dead in a box, as an invitation for Jacob to meet him for a performance at his theatre. The play being held is in Jacob's honour, and Roth confesses that Jacob was very dear to him and close to his heart, However, he wants the pair of them to die together in flames, and starts a fire during the final act of the play. Jacob can however use the rope launcher to avoid the flames and make his way to the stage, where he can kill Roth.
Why did you do it? All of it.
What? Snap a baby crow's neck between my thumb and forefinger. Slice to bits the ones you deem innocent. Keep the world in its divine, manic state. For the same reason, I'd do anything. Why not?
Roth's motivation isn't a very well defined one, and his saying that he does things for the fun of it can provide an interesting comparison to Jacob if we go by the person he was at the start of the game. Whether done naturally or otherwise, the events of the game have matured Jacob, and he comes across much quieter and less brash in the latter half of the game. I think this comes from an amalgamation of events rather than a certain moment, which makes it difficult to pin down exactly why he has become like this. Roth kissing Jacob is a moment that made Tumblr self-destruct. I think in context, Roth kisses Jacob to show that he can do what he wants and doesn't need consent, but also in his dying moments, I think he wanted to believe that there was something there between them, and Jacob's reaction to the kiss seems more irritated. Either way, the scene is played just obscurely enough for people to speculate without it being tokenism. Now, obviously I'm a cis white male, so this could be quite subjective coming from me, so take it with your own interpretation. Moving on, we appear to be near the end of the game, so it's probably a good time to mention Crawford Starrick, since unfortunately everyone else is dead, so we kind of have to address the elephant in the room. Crawford Starrick is my least favourite Assassin's Creed antagonist, mainly because he doesn't do anything. His effect on the Frye twins is only felt through his henchmen, and not in a way that builds up his mystique. I imagine if Starrick was this invisible puppeteer pulling the strings of London, and we had to uncover who he was and bring him out into the public eye, then there would be a lot more merit to his character, but unfortunately I think the writers knew how much of a non-entity he is in the story, and so felt a need to shift perspectives at the end of every sequence to show him having a little rant. He's not threatening, and his motivation is dull and lackluster. He wants the Shroud of Eden, but also wants to control London. Notice how characters like Haytham had one goal, to search for the Piece of Eden, and so his entire arc was centred around him thinking it would be a simple search and go home, but he became invested in the conflict and ended up falling in love. Starrick is simply being pulled in too many directions to fit both of the twins' storylines, and so as a consequence he isn't present in either, and so he severely lets down the finale of the game. In fact, the finale of the game is very much Evie-centric, since it was her mission to find the Piece of Eden. It makes Jacob's involvement in the overarching narrative feel less impactful, and that freeing the London boroughs was simply a way to level gate the player as the story went on, to the point where it feels like this final boss fight could have taken place with or without him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The final sequence begins with Jacob and Evie reuniting after several sequences apart, and Evie is displeased with how Jacob has gone about his time in London, which seems a bit late to mention, calling him out on being reckless, and that she has had to clean up after him. Jacob seems to already be in quite a down mood, and without saying it, I think he feels like a majority of his time has been wasted too, as twice he met with figures he thought he could work with to bring down Starrick, and twice this would end up falling through and he had to kill them. It's like his dream to retake London and make a fun criminal empire has been crushed, and he is happy to just walk away. However, he joins Evie one last time to infiltrate a ball at Buckingham Palace, to hopefully recover the Piece of Eden lying in the grounds. Once Evie can steal the plans and find out the location of the vault, in disguise as a party guest, Jacob is the one to run in and confront Starrick, whilst Evie gets changed. At this point they're both winging it, because they don't have time to waste, but since this is Jacob's usual approach, it does make him the ideal choice.
What? What are you doing? Exploiting. I warned you, my boy. But you
Do not listen.
Also, we thought, as Jacob rushes in and gets taken out of the picture very quickly. Despite him managing to land the first punch on Starrick, this leads to a brawl in which the twins must finally work together to defeat him. Now wielding the fancy Scarf of Eden, which can heal him so long as he's wearing it, making the entire boss fight.
Jacob!
Evie! Now!
Shall we?
Let's.
Together!
The twins successfully remove the Shroud of Eden and kill Starrick. With very little substance to offer, Starrick simply spouts about how he would be the best person to rule London, which is bordering on cartoonish. With him out of the picture and not leaving any impact. Jesus, sorry, I'm just aware that when I was writing this, I was probably quite angry. And not leaving any impact whatsoever, the twins both explain why they won't be wearing the Shroud of Eden.
Will you wear it?
After you sorted out the boroughs, the chaos I caused, I couldn't compete.
Jacob Frye stepping back. Who's blackmailing you? Is it George?
He wouldn't dare.
Not that it was ever set up that they were going to, but it's nice to hear Jacob admit that he's made mistakes along his journey, but instead of being bitter about it, he's thankful that his sister was there to help him, which shows him to appreciate having other people around him, which was shown even back when he wouldn't let Henry Green help him fix the rope launcher. The seeds are there to show Jacob's character arc as one where he learns who to trust, and which people he should let into his life. The Templars he ended up working with were a bad influence, and led him to helping the opposing side, whereas Evie and Henry were the ones he should have been aligned with, instead of going off on his own. Without them, he wouldn't have been able to do any of his achievements across the story. With the final scenes showing the pair getting a knighthood alongside Henry Green, the game concludes with the twins once again in light spirits, and racing back to their train hideout.
Proud of you.
Dame Evie Frye.
Sir Jacob Frye.
Race you to the train.
You're on.
Jacob Frye's journey in Assassin's Creed Syndicate feels incredibly disjointed because of the structure of the game. The game seems to segment each of his sections into their own separate stories, as each borough takes Jacob down a vastly different direction. However, some are much more plot focused than character driven. The two main sequences that explore Jacob's character are the Pearl Attaway and Maxwell Roth encounters, but both are essentially the same story done twice, with little tweaks in between, and it feels like Jacob's character never goes through a clear and distinct arc during the game, but more an amalgamation of other things that build his character to where he is at the end. An argument could be made that Jacob Frye doesn't change at all across the course of the game. I've seen reviewers critique the plot of the game as being very straightforward, and the characters feel the same at the beginning as they do at the end. I can see where this comes from. The first sequence of the game is the twins having a laugh, and the last scene in the game has the twins having a laugh. However, I'm going to argue that it is a lot deeper than that, but it isn't explored enough to call it development. Jacob possesses a lot of traits that are never explored. Being a video game means I'm not expecting every scene to include an insight into Jacob's character, but unlike, say, Assassin's Creed 3, a lot of the roaming conversations are laser focused on plot, and this limits severely how much information we know about Jacob. I have to assume that there were massive changes to the game made behind the scenes. I haven't mentioned the music, but it's a very sombre and melodic score, which seems to be more fitting to the tragedy of the Industrial Revolution, and not the happy-go-lucky characters. Jacob's character design fits on paper, but in execution seems to be for a colder and more ruthless character, which we only really see in the assassination missions. This leads me to believe that it's the comedy that was added in afterwards, and creates a very unbalanced character. I will say that despite his limited screen time in the Jack the Ripper expansion, that DLC helps to focus Jacob's character into one place, and I'd love to do a separate video in the future diving into that expansion. Things like the Rooks are brought up and never mentioned again, which defeats their purpose in the game if Jacob isn't going to interact with them. Jacob's concluding mission is the one with Maxwell Roth, and from there he acts as a supporting character until the end, which makes the game feel middle-heavy for Jacob, but ultimately the game ends with Evie, making his development stunted as he never claims all of London or has a moment to enjoy his success. Things like this would have more naturally reached Jacob's conclusion, where he decides he isn't fit to be a leader. Now I don't mean to be overly negative, because I've shown where there are nuggets of greatness throughout Syndicate for Jacob's character. The sequences where he's written well really work, and I think if there was a better distinction between Jacob's naive and brash personality and the gameplay sequences emphasising action and spectacle for him, whilst Evie had the quieter stealth-based missions, then I think it would have helped to distinguish them and solidify their characters better organically through the gameplay. With all that said, what do you think about Jacob Frye? This was one of my most highly requested characters for the series, and so I'm curious to see what I may have missed or what people's opinions are on him. Of course, we're not done with Syndicate yet, and next time we'll be taking a look through the story again and seeing it from Evie's point of view and see how she fares compared to her brother. I look forward to seeing you then, and do let me know if you'd be interested in seeing a final part where we look at Jack the Ripper as well. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.